Millionaire finds a little girl sleeping in his pantry. This is my bed. It broke his heart. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and type Amen in the comments. A beautiful piece of good news may come your way very soon. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Crawford mansion as Benjamin Crawford's Bentley pulled into the circular driveway. At 40, he had everything money could buy. Yet the emptiness in his chest seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. His tech company had just closed another billion-dollar deal, but success felt hollow when you had no one to share it with. Benjamin loosened his Armani tie as he stepped through the grand entrance, his Italian leather shoes echoing in the marble foyer. The mansion was exactly as he'd left it that morning, pristine, cold, and utterly silent. His housekeeper had the week off, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the ghosts of memories he'd rather forget. It had been one of those days where nothing went right. The merger negotiations had dragged on for hours. His head of security had quit without notice, and in his frustration, he'd forgotten to properly engage the estate's automated gate system. The massive iron gates stood slightly ajar, a mistake that would normally have his security team scrambling, but tonight he was too exhausted to care. He poured himself a glass of bourbon from his private collection, the amber liquid catching the light from the crystal chandelier. The storm outside matched his inner turmoil. Another merger completed, another fortune made. But what was the point when his achievements felt meaningless? At 40, he'd built an empire but lost himself somewhere along the way. The thought of his late wife, Sarah, stabbed through him like it always did. 3 years had passed since cancer took her, yet her absence still left him breathless. They'd planned to have children, to fill this mansion with laughter and tiny footsteps. Instead, he was surrounded by expensive silence and regret. Benjamin walked toward the kitchen, planning to grab something from the refrigerator before heading to his study. The bourbon was already working its familiar magic, dulling the sharp edges of his loneliness. Tomorrow would bring another board meeting, another conquest, another meaningless victory in his quest to outrun the emptiness. But as he approached the pantry to retrieve some crackers, a soft sound made him freeze. It was barely audible over the storm, a gentle breathing, rhythmic and peaceful. His heart hammered against his ribs as he realized someone else was in his house. Benjamin's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the pantry door. Even with his security malfunction, it should have been nearly impossible for anyone to make it past the perimeter sensors and door locks. Had someone managed to slip through during his brief distraction at the gates? He slowly opened the door, expecting to confront an intruder. Instead, his breath caught in his throat at the sight that greeted him. There, curled up on a piece of flattened cardboard, was a small girl with golden hair that caught the pantry light like spun silk. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, wearing a dirt-stained pink dress that had seen better days. Her tiny frame rose and fell with each peaceful breath. Her small hands clutched protectively around a raggedy stuffed rabbit that had lost most of its fur. Despite the worn clothes and smudged cheeks, she was beautiful in the way only children could be, innocent and pure, yet marked by experiences no child should endure. The cardboard beneath her was carefully arranged, smoothed out with the precision of someone who had done this before. Around the makeshift bed, Benjamin noticed she had arranged her few possessions, a small backpack, a plastic water bottle that was nearly empty, and what appeared to be a broken hairbrush. What struck him most was what she hadn't done. Despite being in a pantry full of expensive foods, imported chocolates, gourmet crackers, exotic preserves, nothing had been touched. Not a single item was out of place. This child had been hungry enough to break into his home seeking shelter, yet honest enough not to take so much as a crumb. Benjamin found himself holding his breath, afraid to wake her. In sleep she looked so peaceful, so trusting. When was the last time he'd felt that kind of peace? When was the last time he'd trusted anyone completely? The soft patter of rain against the windows seemed to fade as he studied her face. There was something about her presence that filled the empty spaces in his mansion and in his heart. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel oppressive. It felt protective, like a blanket wrapped around something precious and fragile. As he stood there, watching her sleep, Benjamin felt something shift inside him. This child had somehow made it past his failed security, past his walls, and into the very heart of his fortress. But more than that, she'd made it past defenses he didn't even know he still had. The storm outside seemed to quiet, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Benjamin realized he was at a crossroads. He could call the authorities, have her removed, and return to his safe, empty existence. Or he could step into the unknown and see where this unexpected encounter might lead. As if sensing his presence, the little girl's eyes fluttered open. They were the color of summer sky, wide and alert, despite having just awakened. For a split second, fear flickered across her features, the instinctive wariness of someone who had learned that being discovered usually meant trouble. But then she looked up at Benjamin without malice, without shame, just with the careful assessment of a child who had learned to read adult faces for signs of danger or kindness. She sat up slowly, her small hand smoothing down her tangled hair in a gesture that was heartbreakingly mature for someone so young. Her eyes never left his face as she took in his expensive suit, his shocked expression, his obvious wealth. Then she spoke, her voice soft and matter-of-fact, with the honesty that only children possessed. "I'm sorry, mister. I know I shouldn't be here, but it was raining and I was so cold." She gestured to her cardboard bed with a pride that made Benjamin's chest tight. "This is my bed. I made it myself." Benjamin felt his carefully constructed world tilt on its axis. In that moment, with those simple words delivered in that innocent voice, something inside him cracked open. This wasn't just about finding a homeless child in his pantry. This was about finding hope where he'd thought none existed. "This is my bed." The words echoed in his mind, carrying a weight that had nothing to do with cardboard and everything to do with a child's desperate need for something, anything, to call her own. Benjamin knew with absolute certainty that his life had just changed forever. The question was, would he be brave enough to let it? The silence stretched between them like a bridge. Benjamin wasn't sure he knew how to cross. The little girl, Chloe, she told him her name was Chloe, sat on her cardboard bed with the dignified composure of someone far older than her 8 years. Her blue eyes held a depth that spoke of experiences no child should have endured, yet there was still a spark of hope there that made Benjamin's heart ache. "How long have you been sleeping here?" he asked gently, crouching down to her level. He'd learned from Sarah's work with children's charities that adults could be intimidating when they towered above small ones. The memory of his late wife's gentle way with kids brought both comfort and pain. Chloe tilted her head thoughtfully, as if calculating. "This is my 4th night," she said with the precise honesty of childhood. "I tried the park first, but the sprinklers came on and got my cardboard wet. Then I tried behind the grocery store, but a mean man told me to go away. Then I saw your big house and the gate was open a little, so I thought maybe." She trailed off, her small fingers fidgeting with the worn ear of her stuffed rabbit. Benjamin's heart clenched as he realized his security mistake had provided sanctuary for this desperate child. "Where are your parents, Chloe?" The question felt heavy on his tongue, though he suspected he already knew the answer from the careful way she avoided looking directly at him. "Mama went to heaven 7 months ago," she said, her voice catching slightly on the time frame. "She got real sick and the medicine couldn't help anymore. She told me to be brave and that God would watch over me. Benjamin's throat constricted. The timeline made more sense now, recent enough to still be raw, long enough for systems to have failed her. And your father? Chloe's expression darkened, fear creeping into her young features. He didn't want me after Mama died. He said I reminded him too much of her and it hurt to look at me. He left me with Aunt Rebecca, but her voice grew smaller. She kept me for 6 months, but then her boyfriend moved in and he said I was too expensive and took up too much space. The casual way she recounted her abandonment was perhaps the most heartbreaking thing Benjamin had ever heard. This child had been failed by every adult who should have protected her, yet she spoke of it without bitterness, as if accepting that adults simply couldn't be trusted to stay. So you've been on your own for how long? Benjamin kept his voice carefully neutral, though inside he was fighting a rage that threatened to consume him. Just over a week, she said, then added with heartbreaking practicality, Aunt Rebecca gave me $20 and said I was smart enough to figure things out. But food costs more than I thought it would. 1 week. This 8-year-old had been surviving on her own for just over a week with $20 and her wits. Benjamin's mind reeled as he tried to process how she'd managed it, how she'd stayed fed and safe even for that short time. How did you get food? He asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. Chloe brightened slightly, clearly proud of her resourcefulness despite the circumstances. I'm good at making money last. I found a gas station that sells day-old sandwiches for $1, and I only ate once a day. And sometimes nice people give me change when I sit by the church. I always say thank you and God bless you like Mama taught me. Benjamin closed his eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by the image of this child rationing food and begging for change just to survive. When he opened them, he found Chloe watching him with concern. "Are you okay, mister? You look sad," she said, reaching out with her small hand to touch his arm. Her gesture of comfort, offered to him when she was the one who needed protecting, nearly undid him completely. But he also noticed the slight tremor in her hand, the way her eyes darted toward the pantry door, as if calculating escape routes. Despite her brave facade, this child was deeply traumatized and hypervigilant. "I'm okay," he managed. "But I'm worried about you. Chloe, you can't keep living like this. It's not safe for a little girl to be alone." She nodded seriously, then seemed to fold in on herself slightly. "I know. Sometimes at night I get really scared, and I wake up thinking someone's coming to hurt me. But I'm really good at hiding and being quiet. I learned how when Aunt Rebecca's boyfriend would come home angry." The implication hit Benjamin like a physical blow. This child had learned survival skills that no 8-year-old should need. "Did he ever hurt you, Chloe?" She looked down at her hands, her voice becoming almost whisper quiet. "He yelled a lot. And sometimes he would grab me too hard when he was mad. Aunt Rebecca said it was just because he was stressed about work, but it scared me." "Why didn't you take any food from my pantry?" he asked gently, wanting to move away from the painful memories. "You must have been hungry." Chloe looked genuinely surprised by the question. "That would be stealing. Mama always said that no matter how hard things get, we don't take what doesn't belong to us. She said our name might not mean much to the world, but our word should always be good." Benjamin stared at this remarkable child who had maintained her moral compass despite having every reason to abandon it. Here was a level of integrity that most adults in his business world couldn't match. She'd been homeless and hungry, surrounded by food, yet her dead mother's teachings had held firm. "What did you eat yesterday?" he asked gently. "I found an apple that had rolled under a fruit stand, and the lady there let me keep it because she said it would just get thrown away anyway. And I still had half a sandwich from the day before." She paused, then added with heartbreaking practicality, "I save half of everything when I can, in case I don't find food the next day." Benjamin's hands clenched into fists at his sides. This child had been surviving on scraps and developing survival strategies while he complained about the emptiness in his mansion filled with more food than he could eat in a year. "Chloe," he said carefully, "would you like to have some real food? And maybe a bath? You could sleep in a real bed tonight, somewhere warm and safe." For the first time, genuine fear flickered across her features. The hope that sparked in her eyes was immediately tempered by wariness, and Benjamin realized this child had learned to be suspicious of adults bearing gifts. "You won't call the police or the people who take kids away?" she asked quietly, her voice shaking slightly. "Sometimes they take kids back to places they ran away from, or put them with families who don't really want them. I can't go back to Aunt Rebecca's, and I don't want to go to strangers." "I promise I won't call anyone tonight," he said, meaning every word. "Tonight you're my guest. We can figure out everything else tomorrow." Chloe studied his face with the intense scrutiny of someone who'd learned to read adult intentions for survival. Her small body remained coiled with tension, ready to run if necessary. Whatever she saw in his expression must have satisfied her, because she slowly nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "But I want to keep my bed here just in case. Sometimes promises don't work out, even when people mean them." Benjamin's heart shattered a little more at her precaution, but he nodded solemnly. "Of course. Your bed will stay right here, exactly as you made it." As he helped her to her feet, Benjamin caught sight of his reflection in the pantry's chrome shelving. The man staring back at him looked different somehow, less empty, more alive. For the first time since Sarah's death, he felt like he had a purpose beyond accumulating wealth. This broken little girl with her cardboard bed and fierce dignity had awakened something in him he'd thought was dead forever. The question now was whether he was strong enough to help her heal, or if he'd end up being just another adult who let her down. One thing he knew for certain: his old life of empty luxury and meaningless success was over. Whatever came next, he was going to make sure Chloe never had to call a piece of cardboard home again. But first, he had to convince her that some promises were worth believing in, a task made infinitely harder by the fact that every other adult in her life had already proven her wariness was justified. The guest bathroom on the second floor had never seen a purpose quite like this. Benjamin had chosen it because it was smaller than the master bath, less likely to overwhelm a small child who was probably used to washing in gas station sinks. He'd filled the tub with warm water and bubbles, laid out fresh towels that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and placed a new toothbrush and child-sized toiletries on the counter. Now he stood outside the door, listening to the soft sounds of splashing and what sounded suspiciously like Chloe talking to her stuffed rabbit. But he also heard something else, occasional sharp intakes of breath, as if she were startling at unexpected sounds. The normalcy of a child playing in a bathtub was undercut by the reality of her hypervigilance. "Mr. Benjamin?" her voice called through the door, mispronouncing his name in the adorable way children did. "Can Patches come in the water? He's really dirty too, but is it okay if I keep the door unlocked? I don't like being locked in small spaces." Benjamin's throat tightened with understanding. "Of course, sweetheart. Patches can have a bath too, and you never have to lock the door if you don't want to." While Chloe cleaned up, Benjamin had raided his closet for something she could wear. The best he could manage was one of his undershirts, which would serve as a nightgown, and a pair of his dress socks that would come up to her knees. Tomorrow he'd have to figure out proper clothes, but for tonight it would have to do. He'd also been busy in the kitchen, preparing something simple but nourishing: grilled cheese and tomato soup, comfort food that he hoped wouldn't be too rich for a stomach accustomed to rationed meals. The smell filled the mansion with a warmth it had been lacking for years. 20 minutes later, Chloe emerged from the bathroom looking transformed. Her golden hair, now clean and brushed, caught the hallway lights like spun silk. His oversized shirt hung on her tiny frame like a dress, and she'd rolled up the sleeves with the practical efficiency of someone used to making do. She'd scrubbed her face until it glowed pink, and without the dirt and exhaustion masking her features, Benjamin could see just how beautiful she was. But it was her eyes that caught him most. They were brighter now, the hope in them stronger, though he noticed they still darted quickly around the hallway, cataloguing exits and potential threats. The simple act of being clean and safe had brought back some of the light that should have been there all along, but the wariness remained. "I smell something good," she said quietly, clutching her cleaned stuffed rabbit. Patches looked almost as transformed as she did, his matted fur now fluffy and his remaining eye bright. "Dinner," Benjamin said, extending his hand. After a moment's hesitation, longer than before, as if the vulnerability of being clean had made her more cautious, Chloe took it, her small fingers disappearing into his palm. The kitchen island had been set for two, fine china that had been gathering dust for years, crystal glasses, silver cutlery that had been wedding gifts from his marriage to Sarah. Chloe's eyes went wide at the elegance of it all, but she also took a small step backward. "This is like a princess table," she whispered, then looked worried. "Am I allowed to touch it? What if I break something? I can't pay for fancy things like this." "Everything here is yours to use," Benjamin assured her, helping her onto one of the tall stools. "That's what it's for. And even if something broke, it wouldn't matter. Things can be replaced, people can't." As they ate, Benjamin learned more about the remarkable child who had wandered into his life. Chloe had a quick mind that absorbed everything like a sponge, but he noticed she ate slowly, savoring every bite, as if she couldn't quite believe the food was real and unlimited. She asked thoughtful questions about his work, listened intently when he explained about computers and technology, and demonstrated a mathematical intuition that left him speechless. "So if your company has 1,000 employees," she said, carefully working through the numbers on her fingers, "and each one earns $50,000 a year, that's $50 million just in salaries. But you said your company made $1 billion last year, so after you pay everyone and buy computers and rent buildings, you still have lots left over." Benjamin nearly choked on his soup. This 8-year-old had just grasped basic profit calculations faster than some of his MBA-educated executives. That's exactly right, Chloe. "How did you figure that out?" She shrugged modestly, but he noticed she sat a little straighter at his praise. "Numbers make sense to me. They're like puzzles, and I like puzzles. They're safe. Numbers don't lie or leave or change their minds." The last part was said so quietly he almost missed it, but the meaning hit him like a sledgehammer. This child had found refuge in mathematics because people had proven unreliable. "Did you go to school to learn about numbers?" Benjamin asked gently. Chloe's expression grew sad, a little bit when I was younger. "But after Mama got sick, I had to stay home to take care of her. I would read her medicine bottles to her when her eyes got blurry and count out her pills. And after she died, Aunt Rebecca kept saying she was going to register me, but she never did. Her boyfriend said school was expensive and I wasn't even her real kid anyway." Benjamin's grip tightened on his spoon. The more he learned about the adults who had failed this child, the angrier he became. But he forced himself to remain calm for her sake. "Would you like to go to school?" he asked gently. Chloe's face lit up with such pure longing that it took his breath away. "More than anything. I want to learn everything, reading and science and art and music. I want to know why the sky is blue and how birds know which way to fly south and whether there really are other planets with people on them." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Benjamin found himself smiling for the first time in months. But then he noticed her expression falter slightly. But what if the other kids don't like me? What if I'm too far behind or too weird because I don't know things other kids know? What if the teachers think I'm stupid because I never went to real school? Benjamin's heart broke at the insecurity in her voice. Chloe, you are one of the smartest people I've ever met, adult or child. Any school would be lucky to have you. After dinner, Benjamin led Chloe to his study, a room lined with leather-bound books and dominated by a massive mahogany desk. Her eyes went wide at the sight of so many books, and she moved toward them with the reverence of someone who understood their value, though he noticed she moved carefully, as if afraid to disturb anything. "You have so many," she breathed, running her fingers along the spines. "Have you read all of them?" "Most of them," Benjamin admitted, watching her wonder with growing amazement. "Do you like to read?" "I love it, but I haven't had many books," she said wistfully. "Sometimes the library let me sit and read for a while before Aunt Rebecca's boyfriend would come looking for me, but I couldn't check books out because I didn't have an address." She paused at a section of mathematics texts that had been gathering dust. "What are these about?" Benjamin pulled out an introductory calculus book, expecting her to lose interest. Instead, Chloe opened it carefully and began studying the equations with intense concentration. After several minutes, she looked up with excitement that overcame her usual caution. "These symbols are like the number puzzles, but more complicated," she exclaimed. "This one here," she pointed to a derivative equation. "It's asking how fast something changes, isn't it? Like if I was walking and wanted to know how my speed was changing every minute." Benjamin stared at her in shock. He'd struggled with basic calculus concepts in college, yet this 8-year-old had intuited the fundamental principle in minutes. That's exactly right, Chloe. How did you know that?" She shrugged, but her eyes were bright with excitement. "It makes sense when you think about it. Numbers want to tell you stories about how things work. When I was scared at night on the streets, I would make up number stories in my head. It helped me feel less alone." The revelation that she'd used mathematical thinking as a coping mechanism for trauma made Benjamin's chest tight with emotion. Intrigued, Benjamin pulled out a piece of paper and wrote down a series of numbers. 2, 6, 18, 54. "Can you tell me what comes next?" Chloe studied the sequence for less than 30 seconds, her concentration absolute. 162, she said confidently. "Each number is 3 times the one before it, so 54 times 3 is 162, then 486, then 1458. She rattled off several more numbers in the sequence without hesitation. Benjamin's hands trembled slightly as he wrote down a more complex pattern. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. "Oh, that's a pretty one!" Chloe clapped her hands together, then immediately seemed to catch herself being too enthusiastic and settled back into caution. "Each number is the 2 before it added together. So 8 plus 13 is 21, then 13 plus 21 is 34, then 21 plus 34 is 55. She was effortlessly generating the Fibonacci sequence, one of the most famous mathematical progressions in existence. Benjamin felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just mathematical aptitude. This was the kind of rare genius that appeared perhaps once in a generation. "Chloe," he said carefully, "has anyone ever tested you? Given you problems to solve or puzzles to work on?" She shook her head sadly. "Aunt Rebecca's boyfriend said smart girls were weird and nobody liked them. He told me to stop showing off with numbers or I'd never make friends. But I can't help it. The numbers just make sense to me, and they're the only thing that's never let me down." Benjamin felt a surge of protective anger. This child's extraordinary gift had been suppressed, dismissed, nearly crushed by adults who should have nurtured it. How many other talents had been lost because Chloe hadn't had access to proper education? "There's nothing wrong with being smart," he told her firmly. "And there's definitely nothing weird about having a gift. What you can do with numbers, it's special, Chloe. Really special. Her face lit up with such pure joy that it took his breath away, though he noticed she still glanced around as if expecting someone to tell her to stop being excited. Really? You think it's good that I can see the patterns? I think it's incredible, Benjamin said honestly. I think you might be the smartest person I've ever met. As the evening wore on and Chloe's eyelids began to droop despite her excitement about the mathematical puzzles, Benjamin carried her to the guest room. As he tucked her into the king-sized bed, she looked impossibly small among the luxury linens. "Mr. Benjamin," she whispered drowsily, but her voice carried a tremor of fear. "Will you really still be here in the morning? Sometimes I dream that nice things are happening, and then I wake up and they're not real. And sometimes people change their minds when they think more about it." Benjamin's throat tightened with emotion. "I'll be here, sweetheart. This isn't a dream, and I'm not going to change my mind. Can you leave the door open a little? And maybe keep a light on in the hallway? I don't like when it's too dark and too quiet. That's when the scary thoughts come." Benjamin's heart shattered at this glimpse into her trauma. "Of course, whatever makes you feel safe." "Good," she sighed, clutching Patches close. "I like it here. It feels safe. And I like that you think my numbers are special instead of weird. But Mr. Benjamin, if you do change your mind, will you tell me instead of just leaving? I promise I won't cry or make it hard for you." The casual way she offered to make her own abandonment easier on him nearly destroyed Benjamin completely. "Chloe, listen to me very carefully. I am not going anywhere. You are not going anywhere. This is your home now, for as long as you want it to be." As Benjamin turned off the lights and partially closed the door, leaving the hallway light on as requested, he realized that for the first time since Sarah's death, the mansion felt like home again. Chloe's presence had chased away the ghosts and filled the emptiness with something precious and alive. But as he lay in his own bed that night, Benjamin couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Helping Chloe wouldn't be as simple as providing food and shelter. There would be legal complications, social services, questions about his motivations that he wasn't sure he could answer. And now, knowing about her extraordinary abilities, there would be additional pressures and decisions he'd never anticipated. The child sleeping down the hall was not just homeless. She was a mathematical prodigy who had been failed by every system meant to protect and nurture her. The responsibility was staggering, but so was the privilege of being trusted with her future. Outside, the storm had finally passed, but Benjamin suspected that the real storms were just beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, difficult decisions, and a reckoning with the systems that had allowed a child like Chloe to fall through the cracks. But tonight she was safe. Tonight she was home. And for now, that would have to be enough. The sound of her breathing through the walls, occasionally interrupted by soft whimpers that spoke of nightmares, was the first lullaby the Crawford mansion had heard in years. Benjamin fell asleep to that gentle rhythm, already planning the future he hoped to build with the remarkable little girl who had chosen his pantry as her sanctuary. He had no idea that their biggest challenges were still ahead, or that Chloe's extraordinary mathematical mind would soon attract attention that would put everything they were building at risk. The morning sunlight streaming through the mansion's windows felt different somehow, warmer, more alive. Benjamin had awakened to the sound of soft humming coming from downstairs, a melody he hadn't heard echoing through these halls in years. Following the sound, he discovered Chloe in the kitchen, standing on a chair she'd carefully positioned by the counter, attempting to make breakfast. She'd managed to find bread and was trying to operate his complicated espresso machine with the determined concentration of an engineer tackling a complex problem. Her golden hair caught the morning light, and she wore his undershirt like a dress. the sleeves still rolled up from the night before. But Benjamin noticed other details too, how she'd positioned the chair so she could see both entrances to the kitchen, how she'd left the pantry door open, her escape route still available. Even in safety, her survival instincts remained sharp. "Good morning," Benjamin said softly, not wanting to startle her. Chloe turned with a cautious smile that gradually warmed when she recognized him. "Good morning, Mr. Benjamin. I wanted to make you breakfast to say thank you, but your coffee machine is really complicated. It has more buttons than some computers." Benjamin chuckled, moving slowly to help her down from the chair. He noticed she tensed slightly until his hands were safely away from her. "It is complicated. How did you sleep?" A shadow passed over her features. "Okay, mostly. I had some scary dreams, but when I woke up, I remembered I was safe here. The light in the hallway helped." And as they worked together preparing pancakes, a skill Benjamin had almost forgotten he possessed, Chloe chattered about everything she'd observed in his house. Her mind seemed to catalogue and analyze everything. The way the morning light created patterns on the floor, the mathematical precision of the tile work, even the acoustic properties of the high ceilings. But she also noted practical things. Which rooms had multiple exits, where the phones were located, how the locks worked. "This house is like a giant puzzle," she said, carefully measuring flour with the precision of a scientist. "Everything fits together so perfectly. Did you design it yourself?" "My wife did, mostly," Benjamin said, surprised at how easily the words came. Usually, mentioning Sarah brought pain, but sharing her memory with Chloe felt natural, healing even. "She must have been really smart," Chloe said matter-of-factly. "And pretty, if she looked like you but like a lady." Benjamin nearly dropped his spatula at her innocent logic. "She was both of those things. She would have loved you, Chloe. She always wanted children of our own." "What happened to her?" Chloe asked with the gentle curiosity of a child who understood loss all too well. "She got sick, like your mama did. Sometimes medicine can't fix everything, no matter how much money you have or how hard the doctors try." Chloe nodded solemnly, then reached over and patted his arm with her small hand. "I'm sorry. It's hard when the people we love go to heaven before we're ready. But maybe they're together now, watching over us." The simple wisdom in her words, delivered with such genuine compassion, nearly undid him. This 8-year-old had experienced more loss than most adults, yet she still had comfort to offer others. Their peaceful morning was interrupted by the sharp sound of the doorbell. Benjamin's stomach dropped. He'd been dreading this moment, knowing it was inevitable, but hoping for more time. Through the front door's glass panels, he could see 2 figures, a woman in a navy blazer holding a clipboard and a uniformed police officer. Social services. His security company must have filed a routine report about the gate malfunction, or perhaps a neighbor had noticed unusual activity at his typically empty mansion. Chloe had gone completely still beside him, her face draining of color, her small body coiled with tension, and her eyes darted to the kitchen's back entrance. Every muscle in her tiny frame was prepared for flight. "Are they here for me?" she whispered, unconsciously stepping behind Benjamin as if he could shield her from the world. "I don't know yet," Benjamin said honestly, "but whatever happens, I'm not going to let anyone hurt you or take you somewhere unsafe. I promise." But even as he said it, he saw the skepticism in her eyes. She'd heard adult promises before. He opened the door to find Margaret Torres, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, and Officer Davis, a younger man who seemed uncomfortable with his role in this situation. "Mr. Crawford." Margaret's voice was professional, but not unkind. "I'm Margaret Torres from Child Protective Services. We received a report about a minor on your property. Your security company notified us about a potential break-in involving a child. May we come in?" Benjamin's mind raced through his options. He could deny everything, but Chloe was clearly visible behind him, trembling like a trapped animal. He could claim she was a relative, but that lie would unravel quickly. His only choice was honesty and hope. "Of course," he said, stepping aside, "but I want you to know that this child is here voluntarily, and she's safe." Margaret's eyes found Chloe immediately, taking in her clean appearance, the oversized shirt that was clearly Benjamin's, and the way she held herself with wary dignity despite her obvious terror. "Hello, sweetheart, what's your name?" Margaret asked gently. "Chloe," she answered in a voice barely above a whisper, not moving from behind Benjamin. "Chloe, I'm Margaret. I work with children to make sure they're safe and have good places to live. Can you tell me how you know Mr. Crawford?" Benjamin watched Chloe's face as she processed the question. He could see her quick mind working, understanding that her answer would determine what happened next. The honesty her mother had instilled in her warred with her survival instincts. "He found me sleeping in his food closet," she said finally, her voice shaking. "I was really cold and scared, and he gave me food and a bath and a warm bed. He's been really nice to me." Margaret made notes on her clipboard, her expression unreadable. "How long have you been staying here, Chloe?" "Just since last night," Chloe said truthfully. "Before that, I was living outside because I didn't have anywhere else to go." "And where are your parents, honey?" Chloe's voice grew smaller, and Benjamin noticed her hands beginning to shake. "Mama died 7 months ago. Daddy left me with Aunt Rebecca, but she said I cost too much money and she couldn't keep me anymore." Margaret's professional demeanor softened slightly at this recitation of abandonment. "How long were you with your aunt, sweetheart?" 6 months, Chloe whispered. "Then her boyfriend said I had to leave, so she gave me $20 and told me I was smart enough to figure things out." "And how long have you been on your own?" 8 days, Chloe said, and Benjamin could hear her counting in her head, that mathematical precision even in distress. Margaret's face hardened at the timeline. An 8-year-old surviving alone for over a week was every child welfare worker's nightmare. "Mr. Crawford," she said, turning to Benjamin, "I appreciate that you helped this child, but you should have called us immediately. Taking in a minor without proper authorization, even with good intentions, creates legal complications." "I understand that," Benjamin said carefully, "but she was frightened and alone, and it was late. I wanted to make sure she was safe and fed before involving anyone else." Officer Davis spoke for the first time. "Sir, we're not suggesting you had bad intentions, but there are procedures that have to be followed, for everyone's protection." Benjamin nodded, understanding the delicate position they were all in. But he also noticed Chloe was now shaking violently, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. The trauma of being discovered, questioned, potentially taken away, was triggering what looked like a panic attack. "What happens now?" he asked, moving protectively closer to Chloe. Margaret looked at Chloe, who had gone very pale and was making small, distressed sounds. "Normally, I would take her to emergency foster placement while we sort out her situation, but given that she's clean, fed, appears unharmed, and considering your reputation in the community, I'm willing to discuss alternatives." Hope flickered in Benjamin's chest. "What kind of alternatives?" "You could apply to be an emergency foster parent. It's an expedited process for situations like this. If approved, Chloe could stay here while we work on finding her long-term placement or explore more permanent options." Chloe's grip on his hand tightened desperately. "Please," she whispered so quietly only Benjamin could hear, "I don't want to go back to being alone." Benjamin's decision was instantaneous. "What do I need to do to apply?" Margaret seemed surprised by his immediate response. "It involves background checks, home inspections, interviews, and training sessions. The emergency process usually takes several weeks, but given the circumstances and your resources, we might be able to expedite it to 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Benjamin's heart sank. What happens to Chloe in the meantime? Normally temporary foster care, but Margaret hesitated, looking down at Chloe, who was now hyperventilating. Given that she's stable and safe here, that removing her would cause additional trauma, and that you're willing to go through the proper channels, I might be able to arrange supervised visits and temporary emergency placement here while the paperwork processes. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than losing Chloe to the system immediately. Benjamin nodded. Whatever it takes. Margaret spent the next hour conducting interviews, taking photos, and documenting Chloe's condition and circumstances. Throughout it all, Chloe answered questions honestly, but stayed pressed against Benjamin's side, clearly viewing him as her only protection against a world that had repeatedly failed her. When the officials finally left, promising to return the next day with the initial paperwork, Benjamin and Chloe sat in the living room in emotionally exhausted silence. Chloe was still shaking, small tremors that spoke of deep-seated trauma. "Are they going to take me away?" she asked finally, her voice small and scared. "I'm going to do everything I can to prevent that," Benjamin said firmly. "But Chloe, I need you to understand, this might get complicated. There will be people asking lots of questions, wanting to know why I want to help you, whether I'm qualified to take care of a child." Chloe studied his face with those incredibly perceptive blue eyes. "Are you having second thoughts about wanting me to stay? Because I understand if this is too much trouble." The question pierced straight through him. This child had been abandoned so many times that she expected it, even from someone who had shown her nothing but kindness. "Never," Benjamin said with absolute conviction. "Chloe, in one night, you've brought more life and joy into this house than it's seen in years. You're not a burden or a problem to be solved. You're a gift." Tears gathered in her eyes, but for the first time they seemed to be tears of relief rather than sadness. "Really? Even though I'm broken and scared and I have nightmares and I don't know how to trust people." Benjamin knelt down, so he was at her eye level. "Listen to me very carefully, Chloe. You're not broken. You've been hurt, but that's not the same thing, and family isn't just about blood or birth certificates. Sometimes the most important people in our lives are the ones who choose to stay, who choose to love us even when they don't have to, and I'm choosing you." She threw her arms around his neck with such fierce intensity that it took his breath away. "I choose you too, Mr. Benjamin. I want to stay here more than anything in the whole world." Adee, as he held this remarkable little girl who had wandered into his life and changed everything, Benjamin realized that the easy part was over. Now came the real battle, proving to the world that a grieving widower and a traumatized homeless child could become a family, despite all the odds stacked against them. That afternoon, while Chloe napped fitfully on the couch, Benjamin made phone calls. The best family attorney in the state, child psychologists who specialized in trauma, private tutors who could help Chloe catch up academically without overwhelming her. By evening, he had assembled a team of professionals, all committed to helping Chloe heal and thrive. But as she woke from her nap with a startled cry, reaching for him with desperate hands, Benjamin knew that all the experts in the world couldn't replace what she needed most. Someone who would never leave, never give up, never stop believing in her. The first battle had been won. Margaret Torres had seen what Benjamin saw, a child who belonged exactly where she was. Now they just had to convince everyone else. But as Chloe fell asleep that night, still gripping his hand through the partially open door, Benjamin couldn't shake the feeling that their biggest challenges were still ahead. There were forces at work he didn't understand yet, questions about Chloe's past that hadn't been answered, and secrets that might change everything. For now, though, she was safe, she was home, and she was his to protect. That would have to be enough. 3 weeks had passed since Margaret Torres's first visit, and the Crawford mansion had undergone a transformation that went far beyond the physical changes. Child safety locks adorned cabinets, colorful books filled previously empty shelves, and the sound of laughter echoed through halls that had been silent for too long. Benjamin had thrown himself into the foster certification process with the same determination he'd once applied to building his business empire. Home inspections, background checks, parenting classes, trauma-informed care training. He approached each requirement as another step toward making Chloe's place in his life official and permanent. Chloe had begun to heal in those 3 weeks, though the process was far from linear. Good days were followed by setbacks, nightmares still plagued her sleep, and loud noises made her flinch. But proper nutrition had brought color to her cheeks. Regular sleep had begun to erase the shadows under her eyes, and most importantly, consistent care was allowing her natural personality to emerge. She was curious, funny, incredibly intelligent, and possessed of a gentle wisdom that continually amazed Benjamin. But she was also hypervigilant, prone to hoarding food in her room, and sometimes disappeared into herself when overwhelmed. Benjamin had enrolled her in the local elementary school, where her mathematical gifts had caused quite a stir. Her third-grade teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had called him in for a conference after just 1 week. "Mr. Crawford," she'd said, clearly struggling to find the right words. "Chloe is extraordinary. She's completing calculus problems in her head while other children are learning basic multiplication. But she also shows signs of significant trauma. She won't eat lunch in the cafeteria, too noisy and crowded. She hoards school supplies. She won't use the bathroom unless I escort her personally." The school had recommended testing for their gifted program, possibly even grade acceleration, but Benjamin had been cautious. Chloe had enough upheaval in her life without skipping grades and being separated from children her own age. For now, stability was more important than academic challenges. On this particular morning, Benjamin was in his study reviewing the latest foster care paperwork when his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but something compelled him to answer. Benjamin Crawford speaking. "Mr. Crawford, this is Dr. Patricia Williams from the National Institute of Mathematical Sciences at Stanford University. I hope you'll forgive the intrusion, but I received some rather extraordinary information about a child in your care from her school district's gifted program coordinator." Benjamin's blood ran cold. Word was already spreading about Chloe's abilities, despite his efforts to keep them quiet. "I'm sorry, Dr. Williams, but I don't discuss matters concerning children with strangers over the phone. Of course, I completely understand your caution. But Mr. Crawford, if what I've been told is accurate, this child may possess mathematical abilities that are literally 1 in a million. We'd very much like to meet with both of you to discuss opportunities that could benefit her tremendously." "What kind of opportunities?" Benjamin asked warily, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. "Educational opportunities, research possibilities, programs designed specifically for mathematical prodigies. Mr. Crawford, children with abilities like hers need specialized nurturing that typical schools simply can't provide. There are scholarships, competitions, fast-track programs that could set her up for life." Benjamin's protective instincts flared. "Dr. Williams, Chloe is 8 years old and has been severely traumatized. Right now, what she needs is stability, security, and the chance to heal from her past." "But Mr. Crawford," Dr. Williams pressed, "gifts like hers are so rare. If they're not properly developed, if she doesn't receive appropriate mathematical education, her potential could be wasted. Surely you don't want to deprive her of opportunities that could change her life." "Thank you for your call," Benjamin cut her off firmly, "but we're not interested." He hung up, his hands shaking slightly with anger. This was exactly what he'd feared. Word of Chloe's abilities was spreading, and people were already trying to treat her like a specimen rather than a child who needed time to heal. "Mr. Benjamin." Chloe's voice came from the doorway. Who was that? You sound upset." She was wearing a yellow sundress he'd bought her hair in pigtails secured with ribbons that matched the dress. In the 3 weeks since she'd arrived, she'd gained weight, grown taller, and most importantly, learned to smile without reservation, at least most of the time. "Just business, sweetheart," he said, not wanting to worry her. "Nothing important." But Chloe's perceptive nature picked up on his tension. She climbed into the chair across from his desk, studying his face with those incredibly intelligent blue eyes. "It was about me, wasn't it? About the number games I can do." Benjamin sighed. There was no point in lying to her. She was too smart, and he'd promised to always be honest. "Yes, it was. Some people have heard about how gifted you are with mathematics, and they want to meet you." Chloe's face went pale, and she curled up smaller in the chair, like the people at Aunt Rebecca's old neighbor's house, Mrs. Patterson told me about places where they take smart kids away from their families to do tests on them. She said some kids never come home. Benjamin's heart broke a little at the fear in her voice. "No one is going to take you anywhere, Chloe, I promise. You belong here with me, and that's where you're going to stay." Relief flooded her features, but then she grew thoughtful. "Mr. Benjamin, can I ask you something? Why do you want to keep me? I mean, I know you like me, but you could adopt a baby or find a kid who isn't broken. Why would you choose someone like me?" The question hit him like a physical blow. How could he explain to this incredible child that she had single-handedly saved him from a life of empty success and meaningless wealth? That her presence had brought purpose and joy back into his existence? "Chloe," he said carefully, "do you remember what you told me that first night about your cardboard bed?" She nodded, her expression serious. "You were proud of that bed because you'd made it yourself, because it was yours. It might not have been much to anyone else, but to you, it represented safety and home." Benjamin paused, choosing his words carefully. "That's what you've done for me. You've taken my empty house and turned it into a home. You've taken my lonely life and filled it with laughter and purpose." Tears gathered in Chloe's eyes. "So, we both needed each other." "We both needed each other," Benjamin confirmed, "and we both found each other exactly when we needed to most." Their moment was interrupted by the doorbell, but this time Benjamin recognized the car in his driveway. Margaret Torres was returning, but she wasn't alone. Dr. James Morrison from Child Psychology Services was with her, along with Linda Chen, a family court advocate, and someone Benjamin didn't recognize, a man in an ill-fitting suit who looked uncomfortable and out of place. Benjamin's stomach sank. This looked more serious than their regular check-ins. Margaret's expression was grim as she made introductions. "Mr. Crawford, this is Robert Patterson. He's come forward claiming to be Chloe's maternal cousin and is challenging your temporary guardianship." Benjamin felt the world tilt beneath his feet. He looked at the man more closely, mid-40s, unkempt, with calculating eyes that made Benjamin's skin crawl. But it was Chloe's reaction that told him everything he needed to know. She'd gone white as a sheet and pressed herself against Benjamin's side, her small body trembling violently. "Bobby Patterson," she whispered, and there was pure terror in her voice. "Hello, Chloe," Patterson said, attempting to sound warm and familial. "You've grown up so much since I last saw you. Don't you remember your Uncle Bobby?" Chloe shook her head frantically, trying to hide behind Benjamin. "He's not my uncle," she whispered. "Make him go away." "Please make him go away." Margaret's training kicked in immediately. "Chloe, sweetie, can you tell me why you're upset?" But Chloe had shut down completely, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. Benjamin recognized the signs of a panic attack beginning. Dr. Morrison intervened gently. "Perhaps we should speak with Mr. Crawford privately first, while Chloe has a chance to calm down." Patterson's face twisted with frustration. "Now wait just a minute. I have rights here. That's my cousin's kid, and I've got documentation to prove it. Mr. Patterson, Benjamin said coldly, I think it's clear that Chloe is distressed by your presence. Perhaps you could explain why that might be. Patterson's expression shifted, becoming defensive. Kids get scared of people they haven't seen in a while. It's natural. But I'm family, which gives me legal standing that this stranger doesn't have. Linda Chen spoke up. Mr. Patterson, you'll have your chance to present your case. But right now, we need to focus on what's best for Chloe. Margaret knelt down to Chloe's level. Sweetheart, I know this is scary, but can you tell me about Mr. Patterson? Did he ever visit when you lived with your mama? Chloe nodded miserably, still clinging to Benjamin. He used to come sometimes. Mama didn't like it when he came. Why didn't your mama like his visits? Chloe's voice became almost inaudible. He was mean to her. He would say ugly things about her being sick, and he always wanted money. And he... She couldn't continue, but she unconsciously moved further away from Patterson. What did he do, Chloe? Dr. Morrison asked gently. He touched me in ways that made me feel scared and dirty, she whispered. Mama got really angry and told him to never come back. She said he was dangerous, and if he ever came near me again, she'd call the police. The room fell silent as the implications of this revelation sank in. Patterson's face had gone red with anger and what might have been panic. That's a lie, he sputtered. She's making that up. I never touched that kid inappropriately. She's just trying to cause trouble, just like her mother always said she would. But his reaction was too loud, too defensive, and everyone in the room could see it. Margaret's face had gone professionally neutral, but her eyes were hard as steel. Mr. Patterson, these are very serious allegations. They're lies, Patterson insisted, but his voice had a desperate edge. Look, I'll be honest with you. I heard through the grapevine that little Chloe here is some kind of mathematical genius. There are opportunities out there, scholarships, programs that could be worth a lot of money. Crawford's got enough wealth that he doesn't need what she could earn, but I could really use... He stopped, realizing he'd said too much, but the damage was done. Benjamin felt a rage so pure and powerful that it took all his self-control not to throw Patterson bodily from his house. You just admitted that you see this child as a source of income. Patterson's lawyer, Benjamin hadn't even noticed the man had a lawyer with him, grabbed his client's arm. Don't say anything else, he hissed. But Patterson was too angry to listen. Why should Crawford get to profit from her gifts when I'm actual family? I've got rights here. Judge Martinez, who had been called in for this emergency hearing, spoke for the first time. Mr. Patterson, did you just confirm that your interest in this child is financial? The room erupted as Patterson realized his mistake too late. His lawyer was frantically trying to get him to sit down, but the words were already out there. Dr. Morrison had moved to where Chloe sat, offering her a stress ball and speaking in low, calming tones. Chloe, you're very brave for telling us the truth. No one is going to let Mr. Patterson hurt you. But what if they make me go with him? She whispered, tears streaming down her face. What if they say I have to because he's family? Benjamin knelt beside her, his voice steady despite his own fear. That's not going to happen, sweetheart. I won't let it. Linda Chen addressed Patterson directly. Mr. Patterson, given the child's allegations and your own statements about financial motivation, I'm recommending that your petition be dismissed and that a restraining order be issued. Patterson jumped up, his face purple with rage. This isn't fair! She's worth millions! These math genius kids, they can earn serious money in competitions and research programs. Margaret Torres stood as well, her voice cutting through the chaos. Mr. Patterson, you are confirming every concern we have about your motivations. You're viewing this traumatized child as a commodity. Remove yourself from this house immediately, Benjamin said, his voice deadly calm. And if you ever come near Chloe again, I'll have you arrested. As Patterson was escorted out, still protesting that his rights were being violated, the room gradually quieted. Chloe had stopped shaking, but she remained pressed against Benjamin's side. Judge Martinez reviewed her notes. "Mr. Crawford, given what we've witnessed here today, I'm expediting your foster approval and recommending that we begin proceedings for permanent guardianship. This child clearly belongs with you." "What about adoption?" Benjamin asked. "Chloe and I both want that to be permanent." "That's a longer process, but given the circumstances and Mr. Patterson's complete unsuitability, I see no reason why it wouldn't be approved. We'll start the paperwork immediately." As the officials prepared to leave, Margaret pulled Benjamin aside. "Mr. Crawford, you should know that Dr. Williams from Stanford contacted Patterson. That's how he learned about Chloe's location and abilities. Word is spreading about her gifts." Benjamin's blood ran cold. "What does that mean for us?" "It means you need to be careful. There will be others who see Chloe as an opportunity rather than a child. Her safety and well-being should be your top priority." That evening, as Chloe finally fell asleep in Benjamin's arms on the living room couch, he reflected on how close they'd come to losing everything. Patterson's greed and the spreading word about Chloe's abilities had created a threat he'd never anticipated. But they'd survived it. More than that, they'd emerged stronger, with legal protections in place and a clear path toward permanent family status. "Daddy?" Chloe mumbled sleepily. She'd started calling him that more frequently, and it never failed to make his heart skip. "Yes, sweetheart. We're safe now, right? Uncle Bobby can't take me away." "We're safe," Benjamin confirmed, pulling her closer. "No one is ever going to separate us again." As she drifted back to sleep, Benjamin made a silent vow. Chloe's extraordinary gifts were a blessing, but they also made her a target. He would protect her from those who would exploit her abilities, while still nurturing the brilliant mind that made her so special. The battle for Chloe's future had been won, but Benjamin understood that the war to protect her childhood was just beginning. There would be more, Doctor. Williams, more people who saw dollar signs instead of a little girl who deserved to grow up safe and loved. But they would face those challenges together, as a family. And that made all the difference. 8 months later, the family courtroom felt entirely different than it had during their emergency hearing. Today was about joy rather than crisis, celebration rather than survival. Benjamin sat at the petitioner's table with his attorney, Patricia Wells, while Chloe sat beside him in a navy blue dress with white trim, not because she had to, but because she'd chosen it as her special adoption day dress. The intervening months had been transformative for both of them. Chloe had continued her healing journey with the help of Dr. Sarah Kim, a trauma specialist who had become an important part of their support team. The nightmares had lessened. The hypervigilance had softened, and while Chloe would always bear some scars from her early experiences, she was thriving. Her mathematical gifts continued to astound everyone who encountered them, but Benjamin had been careful to balance nurturing her abilities with protecting her childhood. She worked with a specialized tutor twice a week, participated in age-appropriate math competitions, and corresponded with several university professors who were fascinated by her unique perspectives on complex problems. But she also played soccer, took art classes, and had sleepovers with friends from school. Judge Martinez presided over the courtroom, with the same fairness that had protected them before, but today her expression was warm rather than stern. She'd followed their case closely and had seen firsthand how both Benjamin and Chloe had flourished in their life together. "We're here today for the adoption petition of Benjamin Crawford to formally adopt Chloe Marie Patterson," Judge Martinez began. "Mr. Crawford, please state for the record your request." Benjamin stood, his voice steady with emotion. "Your Honor, I'm requesting to legally adopt Chloe as my daughter. She has been part of my family in every way that matters since the day she entered my life, and I want to make that official and permanent. Chloe, Judge Martinez said gently, do you understand what adoption means? Chloe stood as well, her confidence a far cry from the terrified child who had once trembled in this same courtroom. Yes, ma'am. It means Benjamin will be my real daddy in the eyes of the law, not just in our hearts. It means I'll have his last name, and no one can ever take me away from him. And is that what you want? Chloe's face lit up with pure joy. More than anything in the whole world, Your Honor, Benjamin saved my life, but more than that, he gave me a family. He loves me even when I have bad dreams or when I get too excited about math problems. He taught me that families aren't just about who you're born to. They're about who chooses to stay and love you forever. Judge Martinez smiled. Mr. Crawford, the court has reviewed your petition, conducted extensive background checks, and received glowing reports from Chloe's therapist, teachers, and social workers. It's clear that this adoption serves Chloe's best interests, and that you've provided her with a loving, stable home. She picked up her gavel. Therefore, it is the order of this court that the adoption petition is granted. Chloe Marie Patterson is now legally Chloe Marie Crawford, and Benjamin Crawford is her legal father with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. The gavel came down with finality, but this time it was the sound of a family being officially born rather than protected. Chloe launched herself into Benjamin's arms, both of them crying with happiness. "We did it, Daddy," she whispered against his shoulder. "We're a real family now." "Oh, we were always a real family," Benjamin replied, his voice thick with tears. "Now we just have the paperwork to prove it." The months that followed the adoption were filled with the ordinary magic of family life. Benjamin learned to braid hair with varying degrees of success, attended parent-teacher conferences where he beamed with pride at Chloe's achievements, and discovered that being awakened by nightmares was somehow less lonely when you were comforting someone you loved. Chloe continued to astound the academic world with her mathematical insights, but she approached her gifts with the same joy she brought to everything else. When prestigious universities called offering full scholarships for accelerated programs, Benjamin politely declined. When research institutions wanted to study her methods, he suggested they wait until she was old enough to make those decisions herself. "She's not a prodigy to be exploited," he told Dr. Williams during one particularly persistent phone call. "She's my daughter, and she deserves to have a childhood." One evening, as they worked together on a particularly challenging calculus problem that had stumped graduate students, Chloe looked up from her equations with the bright eyes that had captivated him from the first moment he'd seen her. "Daddy, do you ever wonder what would have happened if your gate had been working that night? If I hadn't been able to get in?" Benjamin considered the question seriously. It was something he'd thought about often. How a simple security malfunction had changed both their lives forever. "I think," he said carefully, "that somehow, some way, we would have found each other. Maybe not that exact night, but eventually. Because some things are just meant to be." Chloe smiled and returned to her equations, humming softly as she worked. The sound filled Benjamin with the same peace he'd felt that first night, when her presence had chased away the emptiness in his mansion. They'd kept her cardboard bed in the pantry, not as a reminder of hardship, but as a symbol of hope found in unexpected places. Sometimes, when Chloe was feeling overwhelmed by her gifts or frustrated with the attention they brought, she would sit beside it and remember the scared little girl who had made something safe out of nothing. "It reminds me," she told Benjamin once, "that even when everything seems impossible, you can still make a place for yourself in the world." As winter approached, a full year since that stormy night had brought them together, Benjamin stood in his study, watching Chloe work on advanced mathematical proofs, while simultaneously helping her friend Katie with basic algebra over video call. She moved effortlessly between explaining complex theoretical concepts and patiently walking a classmate through simple equations, never making anyone feel stupid or less capable. The researchers still called occasionally, as did institutions interested in her gifts. Benjamin listened politely and continued to decline, but he'd started keeping files of their offers. Someday, when Chloe was old enough to make her own choices about her future, she would have every opportunity available to her. For now, though, she was simply his daughter, brilliant, funny, caring, and beautifully, wonderfully normal, despite her extraordinary abilities. She complained about chores, got excited about ice cream, and still sometimes crawled into his bed during thunderstorms. "Daddy," she said suddenly, looking up from her work, "I love you." "I love you too, sweetheart," Benjamin replied, pulling her into a hug, "more than all the mathematical constants in the universe." She giggled at his attempt to put their love into terms she'd appreciate. "That's infinite, Daddy." "Exactly," he said, kissing the top of her head. "Infinite." Outside, snow was beginning to fall, but inside the Crawford house, now truly a home, warmth and love created their own perfect climate. Two souls who had found each other in darkness had created something beautiful together, proving that family wasn't about blood or circumstances, but about choosing to love and be loved in return. The cardboard bed had led to a castle, but more importantly, it had led to a family. As Benjamin tucked Chloe into her real bed that night, listening to her excited chatter about a mathematical proof she was working on and her plans for the weekend sleepover with her friends, he marveled at the journey that had brought them here. A year ago, he'd been a lonely, empty man, living in a mansion that felt like a mausoleum. Now he was a father to the most remarkable child he'd ever known, and his house was filled with laughter, love, and the bright future they were building together. "Daddy," Chloe said drowsily as he turned off her light. "Yes, sweetheart." "Do you think other people will find their families the way we found each other?" Benjamin smiled in the darkness. "I hope so, Chloe. I really hope so." As he closed her door and headed to his own room, Benjamin reflected on the unexpected ways that love could enter a life. Sometimes the most precious gifts came not wrapped in luxury, but curled up on makeshift bedding, trusting that tomorrow would be better than today. Chloe had taught him that families could be built from hope and choice, just as surely as from blood and genetics. She'd shown him that sometimes the people who need us most are also the people we need most ourselves. Their story had started with 5 words that had broken his heart. "This is my bed." It had transformed into something infinitely more beautiful. "This is our home." And that was the greatest fortune Benjamin had ever known.